Good morning on the West Coast, good afternoon on the East Coast, and happy days everywhere in between. Today is Wednesday, September 18th. And as I always say, it's a beautiful day to have a webinar. I'm John Yarrington, CEO of the Performance-Driven Marketing Institute, a 501c6 not-for-profit trade association dedicated to protecting, promoting, and advancing the direct-to-consumer and performance-driven marketing industry. And on behalf of the entire PDMI family, it's my pleasure to welcome you back to a fun-filled and exciting episode of the PDMI Take 20. As a reminder, the PDMI Take 20 is a quick-hitting roundtable discussion led by industry experts on trending topics, all in roughly 20 minutes. And we're joined by a duo of incredibly talented industry leaders, including John Rinaldo of Dish Media and Long Ellis of Denali TV. You know, I can remember a time when the industry was all about dots and spots, yell and sell, all along the linear line. Boy, has that changed. According to eMarketer, advertisers will likely spend $29 billion on programmatic TV ads this year alone. Therefore, today's panelists will be sharing their insights on the ever-evolving and expanding universe of programmatic TV advertising. However, before we get started, please allow me to do a little housekeeping. If you'd like to ask a question, and we encourage you to do so, please use the questions tab located in your control panel. Also, please note you're welcome to ask questions throughout today's conversation, but we'll hold our replies to the end of today's discussion. Alrighty, folks, with that said, it's my pleasure to introduce today's moderator. When in Rome, they do as he does. He's the fearless Chris Foster. Chris is Vice President of New Business and Modern Postcard, a direct marketing agency located in Carlsbad, California. In addition to his day job, Chris teaches brand strategies at the UCSB Extension courses, and he's the chairperson of the PDMI Brand Response Council. As always, Chris, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much. And for the 98th time, because today is our 98th episode, take it away, my friend. Take it away.
Why, thank you so much, John, for that wonderful introduction. Yes, episode 98. We're so excited to have first-time Take 20 guests here. And today we are talking about programmatic TV. The promise of hyper-targeting with the power of what we think of as TV. And the reason I say that is that TV now is in quotes, right? What you say, I'm going to watch some TV, and then my daughter opens up her laptop and she thinks she's watching TV. Very different than I used to watch TV. I used to actually had to turn it on. But what we think of TV has been made real. This promise of hyper-targeting with the power of exposure has been made real. And programmatic buying now makes it possible to scale hyper-targeting. Like John noted some of the statistics. So in 2023, eMarketer noted that 74%, almost 75% of CTV ad spending was programmatic, up from about 53% before the pandemic. And Goodway reported that more advertisers adopt this approach. And total CTV advertising spend, 90% of which is programmatic, is expected to reach almost $40 billion by 2027. And as more viewers turn to streaming services, programmatic ad spending will rise with that CTV adoption. So in addition, the automation of placing these highly targeted ads opens the door for brands possibly who have been traditionally left out of traditional linear advertising due to budget constraints. I even saw this one YouTube ad just yesterday. It's probably because I was searching about programmatic ad buying and CTV. And so I got a targeted ad, a pre-roll ad on YouTube saying that I could get started on CTV advertising for $50, right? So it's almost democratizing some of the opportunity for other smaller brands to be in place. It could be a way to democratize this. It could be a way for all brands to gain more exposure. We also think too that the advent of the iPhone made it possible for apps like Snap or probably even TikTok. Probably TikTok wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for the smartphone. And I'm going to think that also too, there are some technologies that wouldn't be possible, which now are possible leading up to programmatic. So Long, I'm going to ask you first, kind of set the table for us. What are the main advantages and the benefits of programmatic buying?
Sure, and thanks for having me, really appreciate it. I think there's some obvious benefits to buying programmatically. I think it's important also to know that there are different kinds of and types of benefits depending on whether you're a buyer or a seller. And it's also important to look at the different types of programmatic approaches. You've got real-time bidding, you've got programmatic guaranteed, you've got private marketplaces. They're all different. I think what they do have in common, though, is basically speed, accuracy, targetability, efficiency. Lastly, the ability of handling enormous scale. And if you go back to the genesis of programmatic buying, it really started because there was this need in display advertising. All of a sudden, the market was exploding, and you had tens of thousands of websites, and then you had a buying community that was looking at all these opportunities, buying content, and there was absolutely no way of buying it without technology. And so I think that was the genesis, and then it segued into obviously video and connected TV. So in my opinion, I think RTB is not the best approach for premium television. It really is more buying as much inventory as cheaply as you can across multiple supply channels. And, historically, it's been less concerned with really the placements of ads and the context of the programming and the programming itself. So I'm just a traditionalist. I'm not a big fan of RTB, but I think programmatic guaranteed is probably the closest thing, or private marketplaces, to a situation where both sides are in the room, both sides benefit. You're looking at more high touch, managed service type campaigns, with placements. And when you look at TV advertising historically, the big advertisers buy 13 weeks at a time, 4 quarters sometimes, but they're off some weeks, they're on some weeks, they're heading up to coincide with, promotions they do. And so there's a lot to it. There's also, the contextual element. I can't emphasize that enough. I talked to OMD back in the day, and they were saying context is probably 50% of what they do, because, if you've got a serious ad, doesn't play it well in a comedy, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And the performance does a lot better. On the linear side, in terms of programmatic, it's the marketplace is scattered with failures, really. No one's been able to figure it out. There are probably 60 plus companies and a graveyard of these folks, Google TV ads being one of them. I was there and I know, but what we're doing at Denali is taking a different approach. You could call it programmatic for performance marketing and linear, but it's a very much neutral approach that helps both sides. It really lifts all boats. And one thing I never really liked, or I felt uncomfortable about in the programmatic, the digital areas, SSPs optimize against the buyers, DSPs optimize against the sellers. But what you're seeing in the marketplace, I think, is really interesting. And then I'll let John talk. Is that the Magnites of the world, the big SSPs, are buying DSPs. The trade desk is trying to get direct assets, or does have direct access to inventory. And so in their own ways, they're kind of merging the two to something that looks, what I think is more like Denali. But that's what I see the benefits, huge benefits, but it just depends on who you are, buyer, seller, what kind of an advertiser you are.
Right, no, that's excellent. I appreciate that. I guess, you talked about being a traditionalist, Long, and I guess, John, I'll ask you, there's some legacy and history of making sure that, like context is correctly placed, right? That the right ad is placed with the right content. And there are some of these traditional methods that people have done to buy ads and the like. But with programmatic, I have to believe that there has to be a new way of thinking that advertisers have to adopt. Is that true? And if so, what is that new way?
Yeah, there totally is. So traditional TV, you were looking at proxies like network daypart and other proxies to back into audiences. I think even stepping back from programmatic and just going from like a traditional linear approach to impression based, there was a steep learning curve the past few years. Looking at impression based buys versus spot buys, it required a total shift in thinking. And the idea of the elimination of those proxies and just going directly to the audience, right? And then once you get to the impression-based buy, right, whether it's direct or programmatic, we've always been agnostic to whether transactions are done direct or programmatic since we first launched our programmatic offering like 8 years ago on Sling. It didn't matter to us from the sell side. If buyers wanted to transact programmatically, that was fine. If they wanted to buy direct, that was fine as well. It would be the same audiences, it'd be the same inventory, and it just really depended on what the preferred transaction method was. And we still maintain that thought there. But yeah, I mean, things going from network day part optimizations, things like correlating call volume with spot times and web traffic to spot times. Those were kind of the things we'd be talking about 5 years ago. Today, there's a lot more nuance to buys, impression based. They're much more digital. You're looking at some pretty advanced digital attribution methods. There's a lot more talk of fraud and transparency now, which in my world of dish media, we don't really, there aren't any concerns in our world. We're dealing with subscribers. We're dealing with, well-known cable networks that we're now streaming over the top. We're dealing with commercial potted inventory, but we are seeing, a lot of concern from the buy side and, assuring that their ads are running in real content to real audiences in brand safe environments. So yeah, there's definitely been a shift. And the focus has gone from what network day part are we running on to what's the best audience to focus in on to maintain scale while also focusing the messaging on the folks who will most likely respond to ads.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's this, I might be wrong on this, but there's this message of, with programmatic buying where it's more efficient, it's more scalable, quote unquote, someone could say, well, it's a little bit simpler because it's the approach, but it seems actually much more complex now because you talked about kind of connecting, call volume and web traffic to spot times to kind of correlate some type of response or attribution. Now, that's not good enough anymore, right? You have to have a lot more detail because there are a lot more channels where the customer can come in. And so is it more complex than it was?
I think so. Certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things that happens with the complexity and that drives some of the complexity is artificial intelligence. And I mentioned that at the beginning of the broadcast that Snapchat or TikTok, my hunch is TikTok wouldn't be around, or probably even Instagram too, wouldn't be around or as impactful without the smartphone, right? It's that portable smartphone that makes those applications exciting for customers. I would argue that maybe the same thing is with artificial intelligence and programmatic buying. Long, you mentioned earlier that with a digital ad, programmatic digital ad doesn't happen without the technology. It probably doesn't even happen without artificial intelligence. And so, you founded Denali TV, and that incorporates AI into the programmatic approach. I have to assume that programmatic can only happen because of the developing AI technologies.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily true. I look at AI as kind of a nice to have, a really nice to have. but Denali, the platform and what it does in terms of optimization does not need AI. And so just to clarify that, but it's going to be way more powerful with AI. And I think it's really the machine learning part of AI. It's the fact that when you're consuming a lot of data, and that data can really help to inform buys in terms of performance and where the hotspots are for certain ad categories. There's a lot of information that comes in, and we're using machine learning really to improve the optimization, make it faster, smarter, and then really look at the patterns, right, of performance. And like any medium, the audiences shift back and forth. You can lose audiences, you can gain audiences. It's a pretty complex world. The data piece of it is, I think, where a lot of the progress has come, because in the performance marketing space, it's really like a data race. There are boutique agencies that have very sophisticated data modeling in terms of attribution, like you were talking about, tracking ads, the performance of ads. That is creating a much more powerful programmatic capability, because better data, better targeting. It also is going to feed into AI and machine learning. And so, like you were saying, I think the complexity is going to increase significantly, but the capability is going to increase along with it. So you're going to have a situation where AI can be used to plug in all your inputs just based on historical performance. And it's kind of scary, right? Because you got to be careful. you still
Careful
have
what you
people
wish for,
employed.
right?
Yeah. You still have people employed in this business.
Right.
We've actually made a point of developing Denali to just be a tool, where we don't get involved in any of the regular work process between buyers and sellers, the selling, the communication, the billing, the trafficking, none of that, purposely. We don't compete with agencies on the data side. We're agnostic to data. We just ingest the best data that anyone wants to bring. So we're like Switzerland. We sit in the middle. But I think the best years are ahead in terms of ad tech, because AI is really going to kind of jump the moon. But I don't necessarily need it to create what Denali is doing.
Right. No, that's helpful. I really appreciate that distinction. And the ad technology is getting excited. And I guess, John, I would ask you, when you talk to advertisers about programmatic, what are the things that get them excited? What do they get nervous about? Are they willing to completely trust everything to a computer to handle all of their placements?
Well, they shouldn't, and the folks that I talk to aren't. What's exciting, I think it was brought up earlier, and it was brought up kind of on the opening as well, is the fact that programmatic brings TV and makes it accessible to small and medium-sized businesses, or some smaller advertisers that would not have otherwise been able to have a presence in TV, right? I think programmatic does that in a way that wasn't possible before. I think that's a really exciting thing. The ability to optimize and test, with very, very quick turnaround times, right? Testing new creatives, testing new products, testing new audiences, deciding, being able to decide with fairly minimal investment whether or not something's going to work and whether it should be scaled or not. Those are things that can be done in programmatic that are very exciting. In traditional TV, you'd have to run a full schedule and then, wait for results to come in before you could make tweaks. Now you can do all of that simultaneously, and then optimize in a platform. Being able to have full purview over a ton of different ad formats, frequency, optimize across all of them, manage campaigns and have access to publishers, to a wide breadth of publishers that you might not have been able to maintain a number of relationships in the past. All very exciting, I think, to folks we talk to. I'd say what makes folks nervous, the stats that were cited in the beginning, right? 90% of CTV transactions are happening programmatically today. Most agencies I talk to are not transacting 90%, and all the publishers I talk to are not transacting 90%. So that's kind of what I think. Those are some of the things that make folks nervous. I think there's been a kind of a blurring between CTV and OTT in the programmatic realm, which is a little bit concerning, right? CTV by definition is a connected television. It's a TV. Over the top is a different thing, and that those lines kind of blur sometimes, and I think they are blurring a bit in some of these marketplaces. Those are some of the things that I think have started to be talked about a little bit more now that more serious dollars are being, shifted towards these areas. But yeah, there's definitely more excitement than nerves. But I think that as There are definitely
That's
some things that
excellent.
are top of mind. Yep.
The more excitement than nerves. That's what you want. You want the optimism rather than the uncertainty, the nervousness with the uncertainty. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting as you pulled out was, yes, things move more quickly, but when you talked about kind of this overview of frequency and channels and kind of multivariate testing and learning, one of the things I think this does, though, is it accelerates the learning. Right? Instead of waiting 2 or 3 months to learn something, you learn something in weeks or even days. I think that's probably one of the most powerful things from digital marketing. That was the breakthrough with all the testing they could do. You could learn faster and make changes faster and basically pull time and money forward instead of waiting to make decisions down the line. I guess we got just one more question for both of you. What should we expect in the next year when it comes to iterations or changes to this space? Long, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I really think what's interesting is, people said TV was dead, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, right? I don't really know what they meant by that, but I think they were talking about linear TV. TV is not dead, and linear TV is going to hang on, I think, for another, 15, 20 years, like forever. The majority of the money is still spent in linear, which is really interesting. It's not sexy to talk about. There's huge migration of audience eyeballs from linear to connected. It's continuing to happen, but it's like 10% a year. It's slowed down a bit. But where I'm going with this is, and you're seeing it in the ad tech world, I think convergence is something that is very topical. And because linear is still big and connected is now big enough, I think a lot of people are focusing on kind of convergent buys and the ability of being able to simultaneously, like in performance marketing, look at linear and digital. I mean, it's all performance, right? You're all same thing. It's an ad on a connected TV and you're tracking performance, you're tracking sales, website visitations, traffic, responses, whatever it might be. But now you've got an opportunity really to buy more broadly, including digital and linear together. And maybe linear will phase out at some point. But the other thing that's happening, interestingly enough, with linear is that because the eyeballs have left, a lot of them, you've got general marketplace rates, CPM driven campaigns, with their inherent unit rates much lower, right, than they have been 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And now performance marketers can get in there and buy inventory. And it used to be only daytime or one of these day parts that was difficult to sell if you didn't package. Now it's prime time, it's everything. And performance marketing copies, the ad copy is looking much like a regular ad. It's not like the garden weasel, the 800 number. So there's a ton of opportunity, and weirdly enough, performance marketing is a growing area within, kind of a declining medium, that being linear TV. So I see a lot of the focus being, again, convergent moving forward, and that's going to enable buyers, agencies, advertisers, to really do a much better job.
That's awesome. That's a great answer. Thank you. John, what are you seeing as kind of the things that we should be looking for changes in the upcoming year plus?
So changes, there's a lot changing on the data side that we see. The deterministic data sets being made available and some important connections being made. You saw it with UID, you see it with Pair. The ability to leverage deterministic data sets and plug them into CTV is kind of something that's been gaining a lot of traction. One of the things that comes up constantly, and it's probably the excitement, a good answer for your exciting question previously, but live sports is really, it's a topic that comes up on just about every conversation. And we do have live sports available programmatically, which is unique to a vMVPD offering like Sling and Dish. But there's a lot of excitement around live sports. But yeah, in the next year, I think there'll be a lot of progress made on the data side to allow for, the dollars being spent to be spent smarter and with some serious deterministic data sets behind them.
I love it. That's great. And you know, it's interesting. It's like this, as one part of the industry starts to evolve and advance, other part of the industry evolves and advances to meet the needs that happen, right? It becomes more complex, but we need better data to develop deterministic sets. And once that happens, the programmatic thing will adjust to the new data, right? And new methods will adjust. So it's constantly moving and balancing, you know, all of these aspects of the ecosystem. That's fantastic. What a wonderful way to, you know, to close out some of these questions. And John, I'm sure that we've got even better questions from the audience.
Hi guys, great job. Thanks, Chris. I've got a couple quick questions for you guys to share. Let's start with one on data. The assumption with programmatic TV is more personalization equals more conversions. However, that's assuming the data quality is accurate. What's being done to ensure fresh, clean, and relevant data?
What was the last part of the question? I couldn't hear the last.
No problem. I'll just reread the question. The assumption with programmatic TV is more personalization equals more conversion. However, that's assuming the data quality is accurate. What's being done to ensure fresh, clean, and relevant data in programmatic TV advertising?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? You know, speaking from the perspective from Dish Media, right? We've got real subscribers, which is something that we leverage in a big way, right? We've got you know, tons of data on our subscribers, and that's one thing that advertisers really lean on us for is matches with extreme fidelity, right? Like we're able to do one-to-one matches across our footprint for addressable executions, and that's very, you know, it's of utmost importance. I think there's a number of kind of places that there could be data leakage there. So I think that, you know, making sure that from the consumer data set through to the publisher side, you know, that all those connections are strong. But you know, we provide subscriber level matches from our side.
I think just to jump in on this, I think that it's one of the main reasons why connected TV hasn't grown as quickly as people assumed, is the bot activity, is this a real impression? I mean, there are a lot of different issues, right? There's a frequency capping issue because there's so many different platforms, distribution platforms, and people go back and forth between platforms. You know, I don't know if you're like me, but I see a lot of the same ads over and over again. But I think the data has to be cleaned up, right? You have to be able to buy media with the confidence that you are actually getting what you're buying. At Denali, you know, we're trying to get rid of the tech tax. We're absolutely free to advertisers, our capability. I've never believed in, you know, like 65% of the media actually lands and 35% is taken from the tech tax. You know, everyone gets a bite of it. I really hate that. And I think that should be cleaned up as well. You know, maybe we'll evolve into a more direct buyer to seller, less people in between, but yet to be seen.
Great responses, guys. Thank you. And to build off that question, Long, you kind of answered a little bit of this next upcoming question on fraud. But here we go. How relevant is fraudulent or invalid traffic in today's programmatic TV ad environment, and what's being done to detect and eliminate such fraud?
I don't really know. I'm not in this area. You know, I know there's some organizations, you know, the 4As. I mean, everyone is probably trying to solve this one way or another. I really haven't stayed up to date on exactly what kind of progress has been made, so I can't really speak to it.
Yeah, so there's been a lot. There are some folks doing some really good work in the space, and doing some research that, I mean, there are some articles that have been out the past few months that I've read and been like, whoa. But what I'll say is that, you know, when you work directly with publishers, you don't have to worry about fraud almost at all, right? When you're working with a Dish Media or, you know, our counterparts on the marketplace, there isn't fraud. We've got real subscribers. These are real folks who are authenticated, logging in. There isn't any fraud in our environments. When you're in some of these marketplaces or places that are not fully authenticated, that really can't be said with certainty. So I'd say, to kind of echo what Long said, maintaining those publisher relationships is important, even in programmatic. Having direct PMPs and direct PG deals and having those deals set up directly with publishers, although it might be an extra step and a little bit more work, it can really, go a long way in preventing some of the things that are less favorable.
Jumping on with that is the idea that I'd like to see, and I think it's happening. The market is getting away from RTB because I think the advertisers understand the limitations, and also it's a slippery slope to commoditization. I think the TV publishers are looking at this like, what the hell? Why are we doing this? I think the prices keep declining. And so I think managed service, more private marketplaces, programmatic guaranteed, where it's higher touch, you're really providing more of a service, you're being, thought leaders in terms of where these ads should run and what kind of sponsorships are available and interstitials and, all the things that are super important to advertisers. Again, I think they get more value from that kind of an approach versus just RTB and trying to find the audience wherever it is. Context,
Yeah, but Long, it goes back to what you said at the beginning of the broadcast, right? Because even with AI is not going to solve for everything. AI is not going to absolutely know the right context of an ad to the right content, right? Even if it classified as sci-fi or horror or whatever it is, it's not going to drill down to have that human nuance to understand what ad is going to be placed correctly. Even now with advent of Claude and ChatGPT, and for copywriters, a lot of people are freaking out because AI is taking care of so much copywriting. You still have to have a human touch on top of it. You still have to have some kind of a reasonable thought and intuition and experience to place it in. So I like that comment. I think that's very appropriate. All right, John, do we have any questions or are we out?
Let's do one more, and great feedback from you guys. And once again, your final thoughts on that last question opens the door to the next question that we're going to have here. And it's kind of a man versus machine question. Bear with me, it's a bit of a long question, but I think you guys will enjoy it. The viewing shift to CTV is essentially what's seen as the big driver towards programmatic buying and selling. However, as CTV gains market share and clients start to look for more personalization, could programmatic lose ground to more human buying and selling? If so, how might you see that playing out?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I think it will play out. With premium content, I think I'm sort of dissatisfied with the market so far. I think it needs to go back to a higher touch, more thoughtful process. And, context is huge. There are plenty of research companies that show that the context of a show is hugely meaningful to its performance. And if you get away from that and you just buy, impressions, what the heck are you doing? So I see it kind of going backwards now. I kind of blame it on the digital natives who thought, hey, it worked for display. Why shouldn't it work for TV? Come on. I was at Google TV ads, hey, we invented search. Why can't we do TV? You need to understand more about the background of why TV is important and sort of top of funnel branding and how it all works along with kind of retail and what's going on site. There are a lot of nuances to it, and I feel like it needs to kind of be reeled back a bit and less automated. And again, maybe we can get rid of some of these folks in the middle who, it's ridiculous that 65% or whatever the number is of the media actually buys the ads, and 35% is taken by data companies and SSPs, DSPs, the rest of it. It just doesn't seem like that is the right way to do things. But anyway.
Yeah, again, I think that there does need to be a high touch between the publisher, the demand and the supply side, in order to avoid things like fraud and to know what you're buying, right? Like if we're not meeting with folks and they're just relying on the deals that we have set up in programmatic environments, you might not know exactly what you're buying. If you have a 15-minute meeting with my team, you'll know exactly what's included in live sports deals, what's included in our contextual deals, what our capabilities are, right? And there may be some things that we could set up and curate for an agency or an advertiser that will perfectly meet their needs that may not be available off the shelf. So I think just maintaining the relationship between the demand and the supply side, even though technology is taking care of some of these things seemingly, I don't think the full kind of capabilities available without there still being a full service approach to the sales of media.
Great feedback, guys. Thank you so much. I'm going to come back and join you. Phenomenal session, John, Long, Chris. Great conversation today. Thank you so much. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. Before we close out, I'd like to take a moment to invite each and every one of you to join us at the upcoming next version of the PDMI Take 20, which is hosted on Wednesday, October 2nd at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Also, now's the time to register for PDMI's Fall Conference, PDMI West, scheduled for October 7th through 9 in beautiful San Diego at the Hard Rock Hotel. As a reminder, the last day to get your discounted hotel room is today. Yes, right, folks, today. So don't miss out. Take advantage of those cheap room rates. To get your badge and your hotel room, please visit thepdmi.com. That's thepdmi.com. Thanks again, everyone, and make it a great day.